Europe led the world in car engineering until its own engines turned against it. Behind closed doors, companies hid defects, faked emissions, and let families drive ticking time bombs. It wasn't one brand, it was nearly all of them. What you're about to hear isn't just a scandal, it's the collapse of Europe's automotive pride. In the early 2000s, Europe's carmakers were flying high. For decades, they had built a reputation for making engines that were powerful, refined, and surprisingly efficient. And nothing represented that success more than the rise of diesel. Diesel cars, once seen as noisy and sluggish, were now being praised as the future. Governments helped push them forward. After the 1997 Kyoto Protocol, Europe doubled down on the idea that diesel was the key to cutting carbon emissions. Countries gave tax breaks, lowered fuel prices for diesel, and even reshaped vehicle taxes to favor low CO2 emitters. This created a rush. People bought diesels in huge numbers. Car companies celebrated. Brands like Volkswagen, Peugeot, and Audi stamped their cars with eco-friendly badges like BlueMotion and Eco2. They promised over 20 kilometers per liter. Even small petrol engines were being redesigned to compete. But beneath the surface, things weren't so clean. Engineers were under pressure to hit strict emissions targets while still delivering the power and fuel economy that customers expected. The numbers looked good in labs, but the reality on the road was different. And in September 2015, everything came crashing down. The news broke from across the Atlantic. In the United States, Volkswagen had been caught cheating on diesel emissions tests. It wasn't a small mistake. Volkswagen admitted they had installed illegal software in 11 million cars around the world. The software could detect when a car was being tested in a lab. During the test, it would activate the full emission system, making the car look clean. But once the car was back on the road, the software would switch off the controls, boosting performance but releasing up to 40 times the legal limit of nitrogen oxides. The world was shocked. Volkswagen, the proud face of German engineering, had been lying for years. The cheat went back to the EA189 2.0 TDI engine, a core product for Volkswagen. And it wasn't a one-off decision. It had been planned, hidden, and denied for years. Bosch, the company that had supplied the software, had even warned Volkswagen as early as 2007 not to use it in this way. In 2011, a VW engineer raised alarms inside the company calling the software illegal, but nothing changed. The company carried on, hoping no one would ever notice. Then in 2014, a small research team from West Virginia University ran real-world emissions tests on a few diesel cars, including Volkswagen's. What they found didn't match the lab results. Their discovery set off a chain reaction. US regulators demanded answers, and Volkswagen couldn't keep the lie going any longer. By the end of 2015, the full extent of the scandal was clear. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and smash that notification bell so we can keep you in the loop with the latest car news. Volkswagen CEO resigned. The company's stock price dropped by over 30%. They set aside billions of euros to deal with fines, lawsuits, and repairs. In the US alone, they faced penalties of up to $18 billion and were forced to buy back nearly 500,000 cars. The damage wasn't just financial. Volkswagen's reputation was in ruins. Customers felt betrayed, regulators were furious, politicians demanded answers, and trust in Europe's car industry collapsed almost overnight. But the fallout didn't stop with Volkswagen. Other brands, including Audi and Porsche, were quickly dragged in. Investigators began testing cars from nearly every major manufacturer. What they found was disturbing. Most diesel cars on the road were emitting far more pollution than they were supposed to. Some companies didn't use illegal defeat devices, but they did take advantage of legal grey areas. For example, many used thermal window strategies, only activating full emissions controls in a narrow range of temperatures. Even as Dieselgate dominated headlines, other engine scandals were brewing across Europe. Renault and Nissan proudly introduced their 1.2-litre turbocharged petrol engine, calling it the TCE or DIG-T depending on the badge. It was compact, modern, and supposedly efficient. From 2012 to 2016, the engine was installed in hundreds of thousands of cars: Renault Scenic, Megane, Nissan Qashqai, Juke, and even Dacia Dusters. At first, no one questioned the move. Consumers were told they were getting smart, clean technology, but something didn't feel right. Soon, owners began to notice their cars were burning oil, lots of it. Some were topping up liters every few weeks. Others never noticed until their engine suddenly failed. It wasn't a slow breakdown. The engine would seize, or the timing chain would slip mid-drive. One father told of his car locking up on the motorway with his newborn in the back. Another driver's Duster lost power in the dead of night, ending with a €7,800 repair bill. These weren't isolated cases. Across Europe, online forums lit up. Facebook groups swelled with complaints. Mechanics started warning regular customers to avoid the 1.2 TCE altogether. The root cause was still debated. Some blamed faulty piston rings, others pointed at poor timing chain tension, but the result was the same. Engines were dying young. Internally, Renault knew. Documents showed the company was aware of the problems as early as 2015, but there was no recall. Renault insisted that excessive oil consumption didn't pose a safety risk. Try telling that to a mother stranded on a highway at night. By 2019, a French consumer group raised the alarm. By 2022, over 1,100 car owners had filed a lawsuit accusing Renault and Nissan of hiding the defect. The media dubbed it Dieselgate. The name stuck. Renault's reputation took another blow, especially after years of Dieselgate fallout. In the end, Renault agreed to compensate some victims, but only if they pushed for it individually. While Renault battled public outrage, their neighbor Peugeot was dealing with a nightmare of its own. The Peugeot Citroën Group had also gone all in on downsized petrol engines. Their crown jewel was the 1.2-litre PureTech, a lightweight 3-cylinder turbo engine. It won Engine of the Year awards 4 years in a row. Car reviewers loved it, but there was a hidden flaw. To improve efficiency, PSA had chosen a wet belt system, a rubber timing belt that runs inside the engine oil. In theory, it reduced friction. In practice, it disintegrated. Bit by bit, the rubber belt would shed pieces into the oil system. These particles clogged oil pumps and even jammed the vacuum pump, which powered the brake assist. Suddenly, drivers were getting oil pressure warnings or finding their brakes felt weak. Sometimes, the belt stretched or broke entirely, destroying the engine in one go. It wasn't a rare defect. Thousands of cars were affected. European safety regulators issued warnings. By late 2020, over 2,000 vehicles were recalled in France alone. PSA admitted the belts wore out faster than expected, but blamed it on fuel diluting the oil. Their solution? Changed the oil more often, but that didn't help those whose engines had already failed. Even cars built after 2017 kept showing the same problem. By 2023, PureTech problems had become a running joke among French drivers. Online groups mocked the engine as pure trouble. Mechanics made good money from engine rebuilds on Peugeots that were barely out of warranty. One man bought a 2021 Peugeot 208, only to have the timing system replaced after just 16,000 kilometers. He called it shameful. Stellantis, which now owns Peugeot, quietly extended some warranties and offered repairs, but like Renault, they denied any real design flaw. Then there was the BMW N47 diesel engine. This engine was supposed to be BMW's answer to strict emissions laws. Powerful, efficient, low on CO2, it ticked every box regulators wanted. But behind the numbers and promises was a ticking time bomb, the timing chain system. Placed awkwardly at the back of the engine, where it was hard to access, the chain had a habit of stretching far too early. Some made it to 100,000 kilometers, others didn't even reach 60,000 before the noise grew louder, and then catastrophic failure. The chain snapped, and with it went the valves, pistons, and camshaft. Engines didn't just stop, they self-destructed. Owners were told repairs could cost over €8,000. For many, it was more than the car was worth. BMW didn't issue a recall. They said it wasn't dangerous, even though drivers reported engines cutting out mid-drive. The company offered extended warranties to some, others were left stranded with massive repair bills. German forums were flooded with angry posts. Mechanics refused to buy cars with N47 engines. The name became toxic in the used car market. For a brand built on precision and trust, the damage was brutal. But BMW wasn't alone. Over in Italy, Fiat was fighting its own diesel disaster. One that started with pride and ended in scandal. Fiat's multi-jet diesels were once hailed as brilliant. The 1.3-litre version powered small cars across Europe. The 1.9 and 2-litre versions ended up in everything from Alphas to Jeeps. These engines were supposed to bring punchy torque and great fuel economy to the masses. And for a while, they did. Then came the emissions probes. Investigators discovered that Fiat Chrysler had used software to quietly control emissions tests, something eerily similar to Volkswagen's Dieselgate. In the US, Fiat was fined hundreds of millions of dollars. Internal emails showed engineers joking about their magic devices. Europe, at first, defended Fiat, but Germany's regulators found issues too. Slowly, the Italian diesel image began to unravel. There was also mechanical problems. The timing chain in the 1.3 multijet was delicate, sensitive to poor maintenance. Miss an oil change or delay service intervals and the chain could stretch or snap. The larger engines had issues with clogged EGR valves, DPF failures, and more. Mechanics struggled. Owners grew frustrated. By the late 2010s, used car buyers started warning each other, avoid aging multijets unless you're ready for pain. For European consumers, trust was shattered. The diesel engine, once the king of the continent, fell out of favor almost overnight. In 2015, diesels made up around half of new car sales. Just a few years later, that number was in freefall. By 2023, it was barely 12%. Some cities began banning older diesels altogether. Dealers refused to take them as trade-ins. Once prized for their fuel economy and resale value, diesel cars became liabilities. The scandals also triggered legal action. In Germany, Volkswagen was forced into a massive payout after a class action suit. In the UK, tens of thousands of owners took VW to court, claiming that the emissions fix they received made their cars worse, slower, less efficient, and riddled with new problems. Meanwhile, regulators in France and Italy began targeting their own carmakers. CEOs were questioned, some were indicted. Courtrooms across Europe filled with angry drivers, legal teams, and damning evidence. All of it left a bitter aftertaste. For decades, Europe had taken pride in its car industry. It wasn't just about jobs and exports. It was part of the culture. German precision, Italian passion, French flair. But by the late 2020s, that pride had turned into disappointment. People who once swore by brands like BMW, Fiat, or Volkswagen now warned friends and family to stay away.